hell of a, she's so fine. Hell of a, blows my mind. Hell of a, lights my day.
Hey guys, today is Tuesday, August the 18th, 2020, and this video will be in regards to the Kenneka Jenkins case, and specifically as it relates to intoxicated witnesses, because that's essentially what we have here. We have the party at the Crowne Plaza with a whole slew of people who were drinking and smoking weed, and some of who were taking pills. So I kind of wanted to do just a little research on how credible the intoxicated witness really is. Because I know in the statements there's a lot of inconsistencies in there, and do you chalk it up to the drinking or the other things they were doing? Or do you chalk it up to something other than that? So let's just take a look at this. So this is a study that they did. The study in regards to law and human behavior. It was done in April of 2012. It says, intoxicated eyewitnesses better than their reputation? And that's a question. So these are some of the authors of this study. A couple of them are FIU students, an Auburn University student. It says, according to law enforcement, many witnesses are intoxicated either at the time of the crime, the interview, or both. However, no study to date has examined whether intoxicated witness recall is different from sober witnesses, and whether they are more vulnerable to misinformation using an ecologically valid experimental design. Intoxicated, placebo, and sober witnesses observed a live staged theft, overheard subsequent misinformation about the theft, and took part in an investigative interview. So what they did is they took intoxicated people, placebo, they had a placebo group, and then sober witnesses. And they presented them with a staged theft, and also let them overhear this misinformation regarding that theft. And then they began to interview them. Participants generally believed they witnessed a real crime and experienced a real interview. Intoxicated witnesses were not different from placebo or sober witnesses in the number of accurate details, inaccurate details, or, quote, don't know, end quote, answers reported. All the participants demonstrated a misinformation effect, but there were no differences between intoxication levels. Intoxicated participants were not more susceptible to misinformation than sober or placebo participants. Results are discussed in the light of their theoretical and applied relevance. So, what they found after they did these interviews, is that the participants really truly believed that they had witnessed a real crime and had been given a real interview regarding that crime. And they found that the intoxicated witnesses were not different from those who were in the placebo group and the sober witnesses, in that they gave the same amount of accurate details, same amount of inaccurate details, and they also gave the same amount of don't know answers. And it says they all, they put some misinformation in there to see how that would affect everything. And it says all participants demonstrated a misinformation effect. So they all demonstrated the same. But there were no differences between the intoxication levels. So they come to the conclusion that intoxicated participants were not more susceptible to misinformation than those from the sober group or the placebo groups. And I think that's interesting. So we'll look at one more thing here in regards to this. And this is from scientificamerican.com. And it's a blog. Before anybody says anything, it is a blog by Julia Shaw. And it's from April the 5th, 2017. It's a guest blog. It says, "Is a drunk witness a bad witness? Eyewitness memory appears to be largely unaffected by mild or even moderate alcohol consumption. Picture this. You are in a bar. You have been drinking beer for a few hours. One turned into two, turned into five. In a drunken state, you leave and you begin to stumble home. On the way home, you witness a violent assault. You immediately call the police and tell them what you remember. Every day, people find themselves in exactly this kind of situation. Crimes are often committed by drunk people against drunk people in front of drunk people. This is particularly true of violent crimes. When we try to solve these cases and hold perpetrators accountable, the accounts of those involved might be the only evidence available. But can we trust these memories?" Lauren Mons is a postdoctoral researcher in addiction medicine at the University of Sydney, Australia. Her work focuses on understanding how people who use substances think and behave. She also has a background in researching false memories for distressing events. This puts her in an ideal position to tell us whether drunk people can have reliable memories. Better than we think. According to Mons, quote, "We already know that our memories are not perfect. Flawed eyewitness memory is one of the key reasons for wrongful convictions. We also know that different substances, e.g. alcohol, illicit substances, and certain medications, can potentially impair memory," end quote. So, how exactly does alcohol impact eyewitness memory? Most experimental research, like this study, and this study, and this study, and there's links for all three of those, has found that intoxicated eyewitnesses are actually no different from sober eyewitnesses in their account accuracy or vulnerability to distortions. One study published this year even found that consuming alcohol after witnessing a crime made witnesses more reliable by making them less likely to accept false details given to them by a researcher. However, Mons argues that this research should be taken with caution, quote, "While there have been several lab studies where people are given alcohol and then their memory is tested, this generally involves low levels of alcohol," end quote. In other words, participants in research studies might not be as drunk as people who walk out of the bars after 5 whiskey sours and witness actual crimes. She argues that this means, quote, "We don't actually know how much, or even in some cases if, intoxication impairs eyewitness memory for an event," end quote. So what's a cop to do? Mons says that police often have guidelines about how they should treat people who have been drinking. Quote, "Generally, police interviewing procedures preclude interviewing intoxicated witnesses," end quote. She says that this is problematic because on top of the issue that intoxicated witnesses may not actually be so bad, such guidelines also involve the assumption that a police officer can spot whether someone is drunk or otherwise intoxicated without doing any actual drug testing. Seems easy enough. Slurring words, stumbling about, perhaps some random giggling. These are the kinds of behaviors we might see in some cases, but they are by no means universal. Perhaps, like me, you have a few friends who can act far more sober than their alcohol consumption warrants. This begs the question, what does a drunk person look like? Mons points out that there is almost no research on whether people can tell that others have been drinking. This is part of what her next line of work on intoxication detection will look like. Quote, I am hoping that my research will contribute in two main ways. To help determine what, if any, cues to intoxication are useful, and to help work out how memory is impaired for events when under the influence, end quote. The take-home message seems to be that witnesses who are suspected of being intoxicated should still be taken seriously. Additionally, people who are slightly or moderately drunk should be interviewed immediately after witnessing a crime, rather than after they have sobered up, according to this study that she's linked there. Don't let a few drinks stop you from giving a witness statement. An intoxicated witness can still be a good witness. So, just a quick word about Julia Shaw. She's a research associate at University College London, speaker, author of the book The Memory Illusion, Remembering, Forgetting, and the Science of False Memory. And she released that book in 14 different languages in 2017. So she knows a little bit about research. So it's interesting, because I have heard that excuse used in the J4K community. Oh, well, the girls were drunk, and, that accounts for some of the inconsistencies in their statements. But I don't believe that. And that's just my personal opinion. That's not something I'm trying to force down your throat or say, oh, that's the facts. No, that's just my personal opinion. I don't believe it had anything to do with what they were consuming at all. I believe that the inconsistencies were for other reasons. So, let me bring something else up. Now, if we go back to Zach TV1's interview with Irene, which I'm not going to play, but there's a couple of things that stand out in regards to this subject. Zach TV1 says, or asks Irene, why did you mainly keep the camera on yourself? And Irene said, quote, because I was high off X. You barely see me looking at the camera. I'm trying to get the phone to work. It's steady buffering. Signal in the hotel is bogus, end quote. Alright, so she blames the camera, the live being mainly on her. She blames that on her use of X. Alright. Next question that he asks. Talking about, Zach said something about hearing the muffled voice saying something like, they're raping her. Do you know what I'm talking about? And Irene says, quote, yeah, I know exactly what the whole Facebook talking about. That's when they you talking about, I'm like, I told you. And Zach TV1 said, yeah, I told you. And Irene said, quote, I told y'all the mess. That's them talking about the parking tickets. Like, nothing about raping her. Nothing. Then Zach asked her, who said what in that conversation? And Irene says, quote, I think that was Bree sitting next to me. And talking about the parking tickets. I'm not for sure because I'm off X. So all this was really... And then Zach interrupts her and says, so you off X, so you rolling. Excuse me. Irene says, yeah, I ain't. I'm like, she's like, something about the parking tickets. I'm like, I told your dumbass. Then she goes on to blame that on the sick people in the world hearing that in that conversation. Alright. So Irene's interview with Zach Stoner, Zach TV1, was roughly an hour long. And she remembered all these details about the party. All very specific details, times, who was where, when. She remembers all this stuff. Yet when it comes to these two very specific questions, she takes the, I plead the I was on X route. And those two questions are, why did you mainly keep the camera on yourself during that Facebook Live? Which is a very good question. Because she says her whole intention with that was to show that the party was popping. But the party wasn't popping at that time. There was nobody there. And that's what she told Zach Stoner, okay? So, she blamed that on being on X. And the other one that she stumbled through was the whole conversation that's going on in the background. Where Zach said that it sounded like the muffled voice was saying they're raping her. And she stumbled her way through that and basically blamed it on X and blamed it on the sick people of the world. So we're going to take another listen. And I will keep listening to this as long as it takes until we get every little detail out of it. So for those that don't want to listen, tune out. Because I'm going to continue to listen to these things when I hear something that it pertains to. So let's take another listen. This is, of course, the clarified audio, if you will. So let's just take another listen. Adjust your volume, because it might be loud, so.
You funny as fuck, Booby.
It's bad. Honestly. Let me see, Irene.
Slow your roll, shorty.
That keep my head calm.
Who's got the numbers?
This slow fucking.
Let me see it.
She played fucking
Let me see
Rick
it.
Ross.
Let me see. Same motherfucker called me wolfing early. So I want to see the phone. That's crazy.
Man, the phones ain't working. This is a weak ass connection.
Let me see what y'all want.
Shut up. You stay at the top of it. You want to get into it?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I ain't trying to get into it. You know about
Y'all blowing me.
back and forth like some boy.
Shit.
That's Shemaya.
Damn, my shit turning red. You know I'm on this act like.
No, we don't.
Yo.
Hi, that is nice. So it's not nice? No.
Yeah, it's big, ain't it?
I sure hope somebody come there.
That's right then.
Yeah.
That's you?
Mm-hmm. I just got them things.
No, tough shoe. All night. All
Did too.
All tough shoe.
Hello.
She thinks she crazy.
Parking inside. It's the parking lot. It's a parking lot.
Motherfuckers can use them tickets a lot of times too. He said you can go in.
Park at the parking lot.
If somebody else parking here, y'all just gotta let them do y'all shit.
You look pretty. Happy birthday. Thank you. That is my kid.
Y'all leaving out watching.
I told you. What you saying over that slick?
For real, see, I read that thing. Clear, say $200.
What you say? What you say, Gail Smart?
I really need the weed, bro.
Damn, I just got the weed.
Bitch, you just passed and they just passed it back.
Let me see who you talking to. It don't matter. I'm putting my face on this now. Did you put any enforce in this?
Someone's phone. 125.
It's y'all a weak ass connection. Hello? 926. 26.
I'm out. You can go out to sea. Me too, sure. See that?
What y'all can do?
Yeah, you swear about me.
What the fuck? got some money for it. Check it out. Yeah.
I'm not drunk.
You don't have to enjoy yourself.
I am enjoying myself.
I'm out here. I'm telling you. What's up? You riding with me on what? Boy, you tripping, man. Check it out.
What you doing, really, I told him, bitch, check it out. Check it out. Check it out, my doors creepy up. You know 48. Check it out, you know creepy up. Niggas see me goes up 8. You know beat me up. Where's most check it out? Check it in, check it out. Check it in, where's all check it in the next. Never down to get a script, then I'm checking out. You got the money, check it out. Don't let you know I had to bring the never down. Yeah. Check it out. She wanna check me out. Bitch, check it out. Bitch, I'm already checking out. Check it out. Like my shit be talking, I ain't had to work it out. Check it out. Looking at me, bitch, check it out. She's never been a boss, check it out. Check it in, check it out. Checking my cup for books, checking my cup for doors. Checking my cup for change, just to get to the club. On the truck spot out, we gon' come through right on. Check them in the door,
Better be right when I count it off. We'll see what the look off is tracking going. These ain't no time for
the shooters, the nine shaking up on the neck, calling that bullet with now. Smoking no dope, I'm calling up, be smoking that matter. Come to more chicken, no chicken, y'all chicken for matter. Chicken for hoes, I get my pocket check up. Check it for you. You seen on your ass, get up, boy. So build that ring, merge others and marble floors. You got some money.
Alright, there's one other thing that I wanted to look at, but to sum up this part, they had an entire party full of intoxicated people who were the witnesses that they had to rely on, and it didn't matter, according to studies, because there is no difference between someone who is intoxicated and someone who is not, in regards to witness statements. So, and that's based off of several studies. I just showed the one, but I could pull up the others if I needed to. I just thought that would kind of show, basically, because I've heard it said so many times to be blaming all this on them not being able to recall events because of drinking, and no, that's not the case. So, there's one other thing, though, that I did want to look at in regards to Irene. So, we know that Irene was on Ecstasy. Several of the other girls said they were also on Ecstasy. Then Irene further said there was a lot of people on Ecstasy. So, I wanted to look at it just briefly to kind of see where it lies in as far as what it does, because I'm not familiar with it. Alright, it says it's a common name for the drug MDMA, often called Molly, which is short for molecular, due to its appearance as a pure fine powder in a small capsule that is taken orally. Synthetic drug has properties of both stimulants and hallucinogens, producing feelings of euphoria, bursts of energy, feelings of warmth and happiness, and sensory perception distortions. One other thing that Irene did say in her interview with Zach, she made mention several times about being off this X. So at the end of the interview, he asked her, Is this going to play a part in, not using drugs again? And she said, honestly, no. She said, because he said basically the truth, which is, with so much going on in the world, you don't need to be off of drugs because it's hard enough to protect yourself, period, much less being off of drugs. So, anywho, he says, he's going through that. He says, I'm not trying to lecture you because you're an adult, and she says, well, that's why I like the X, because the X makes me alert. She basically just went against everything that she had just said in regards to being intoxicated or high. So I thought that was interesting, because she said that's what she liked taking X for, is because it makes her alert. It will hardly let her sleep. So she actually just refuted everything that she had said in the first 10 minutes of the interview itself. It says this substance is well known for its popularity, blah, blah, blah. I want to get down here to the... Alright. Because she makes mention of everyone on Facebook saying that she was shaken, was she scared, blah, blah, blah. So she says, you take X and then you'll see. You'll shake too. So I wanted to show you guys. It says, it can be difficult to spot signs of ecstasy use due to the fact that it is so often taken with other intoxicants, which alter the symptoms. There are, however, some key effects of ecstasy that will give this particular drug away. These include euphoria, unusual feelings and expressions of love, increased capacity for empathy, increased joy in the senses, particularly sight and touch, teeth clenching, which we see in her live. She clenches her teeth quite a bit in that live. And it says, often alleviated by the use of pacifiers. Wow. Increased thirst, impulsiveness, reduced anxiety and depression. And then it says, look for these common signs of substance addiction. Changes in social circles, sudden difficulty in meeting daily responsibilities, reluctance to attend social or family events, where the drug will be unavailable, lying or secretive behavior, hiding the drug around home, financial or legal difficulties related to substance abuse. But I wanted to see if they had mentioned anything about shaking. I know everybody experiences things differently. But, I didn't see it mentioned there. Doesn't mean it's not, the case. It says withdrawal symptoms include anxiety and depression, confusion, depersonalization, insomnia, fatigue, irritability, mood swings, loss of appetite, difficulty concentrating, panic attacks, paranoia, memory problems, muscle stiffness, hallucinations, delusions, and psychosis. It says that withdrawal symptoms usually start within 12 hours of the last dose, with the most intense symptoms typically pass within a few days. So I just thought it was worth looking at anyway to see if shaking was a symptom on this website, which is the American Addiction Centers. So, I just wanted to... I'm going to keep picking this case apart piece by piece, because I feel like that's what I have to do to get some kind of clarity out of it. Because when you look at it as a whole, it is so overwhelming, because there are so many inconsistencies just all the way throughout the case. So, that's why I'm picking it apart piece by piece, and I'm going to continue to do so. And if you don't want to watch it, that's fine, but that's what I'm going to continue to do, because I get a lot of good ideas in the comments, and I appreciate each and every one of them. And, sometimes it makes me think completely outside the box, and I value those comments for people that leave those, that have, a different perspective on it. So, regardless, I hope you guys have a great night. This wasn't the video I was even going to be working on. So now I have to start all over. But I was working on another video when I started thinking about, you know, all these cop-outs for the intoxication. And I just wanted to look into that and show you guys what really was going on there. So, you guys have a great night.